Lexus has had kind of an off and on again relationship with large luxury coupes. They did have the SC300 back in 1991, the SC430 in 2001, and now in 2018 we have the all-new Lexus LC. Lexus has of course made other coupes like the IS Coupe convertible or the Lexus RC Coupe, but the mission of the LC Coupe is different. This is trying to compete with things like the BMW 6 Series. You can also see this as a competitor to the Jaguar F-Type or certain Mercedes models, even though the F-Type is smaller than this. The big difference is price tag, of course, because this starts almost at $100,000. This is in a very different category than something like a BMW 4 Series. Up front, the LC definitely looks like the most expensive Lexus in America. This looks an awful lot more like a concept car than the Lexus RC Coupe, which is considerably less expensive, or even the brand new Lexus LS sedan, even though this is closely related to the LS. We have the signature Lexus spindle grille going on right here, a large Nike swoosh lamp right there, that's the daytime running light strip. It goes into the headlamp module, and these are full LED lamps. Finishing things off, they put a turn signal right down here. We have a functional air vent, and then a gray trim strip around it. From the side, the LC is definitely sleek and muscular. You can see these rear tires really stick out quite far from the rear window itself, and there are a lot of bulges and curves going on here. At 187 inches long, this is almost 2 feet shorter than the Lexus LS 500. This is about 10 inches shorter than an S-Class Coupe and 5 inches shorter than a BMW 6 Series. But it is about 2 inches longer than something like an E-Class two-door. In terms of overall size, this is quite similar to something like a Porsche 911 or a Mercedes-Benz GT. Unlike earlier attempts at Lexus performance coupes, this actually has the ability to compete dynamically with the Porsche and of course the Mercedes, although we don't find quite as much power under the hood. Out back, we find a lot of the same styling cues we found up front. They mirror the spindle grille right here in this crease. We have the same sort of thing going on in these tail lamp modules as we found in the headlamp modules. Turn signals on the side, as you can see right over there, and then tail lamp modules right inside there. At the bottom of the bumper, we have functional dual exhaust, and in case you're wondering, they put the backup lights right there in the middle. The tail lamp modules feature sort of a hall of mirrors effect where you can see this Nike swoosh repeated over and over and over again going into the tail lamp module. It really is kind of an interesting touch. Under the hood, we don't find Lexus's brand new 3.5-liter twin-turbo V6. Instead, we actually find a naturally aspirated 5-liter V8. This is essentially the same engine that we see under the hood of the RCF and the GSF. It produces 471 horsepower under this hood and 398 pound-feet of torque. That means that this is one of the few naturally aspirated V8 engines that we find in this kind of luxury segment. Just about everyone else seems to be moving on over to twin-turbo V8s and twin-turbo V6s, so if you prefer the way a naturally aspirated V8 engine sounds and drives, then this might be an excellent option for you. The engine is mated to a 10-speed automatic transmission, sending power to the rear wheels. There is also a 3.5-liter V6-based hybrid system that's brand new for the Lexus brand and is shared with the larger LS 500H. The new hybrid system is quite different than some of Lexus's previous hybrids because it now uses a 4-speed automatic transmission coupled with their planetary gear set hybrid system to give you 10 definite gear ratios. The addition of the 4-speed automatic helps improve performance and acceleration with that hybrid model, although it's definitely going to still be slower than what we see here. Front seat comfort comes in at 7 out of 10 points for the luxury large coupe segment because we don't find the same range of motion in these seats as we do in a lot of the competitive seats. I'm not sure why, but Lexus did not put the same seats that we find in the LS sedan in the LC Coupe. Those have 28 ways of motion. These have considerably less because we have a 2-way adjustable lumbar support and we don't have an extending thigh cushion. We do, however, still have a tilt telescopic steering column that's linked with a 3-position seat memory. Although technically a 4-seater, the LC is just about as much of a 4-seater as a Porsche 911. Headroom and legroom are definitely very limited in this vehicle. If I push this front seat back just a little bit more, it would actually be touching the rear seat back, and you really couldn't put anybody back here, even little kids. That's not too unusual, of course, because a lot of luxury coupes really have very, very tiny back seats. In reality, you should look at these back seats as more of a really nicely upholstered storage for your purse or handbag. The trunk release is hidden right here inside the passenger tail lamp module, and if we lift the trunk lid, we find 5.4 cubic feet of storage space. That's about the same kind of storage space we find in a wide variety of convertibles, even though this is a hardtop coupe. That means that your cargo capacity is limited to maybe 2, perhaps 3 of these 22-inch roller bags, depending on exactly how you can slot them in the trunk. Because of the overall design of the trunk, you cannot have them in this position and still close the trunk lid. The load floor comes up in 2 sections, and we find tool storage under the first section, and under the back section, that's where we find the 12-volt battery. You'll notice that there's no spare tire in the LC500. As we look around the interior, you should know that we're in the model with the optional carbon fiber roof instead of the glass roof, so we don't have anything going on right up here. The front seats are made out of a combination of leather and a faux suede fabric that's perforated in the center. You can see that we have fairly aggressive bolstering on the side and the bottom cushions. Instead of wood trim like we find in most Lexus models, we have a large area of that same faux suede fabric going on right here, with the door handle sort of floating right there in the middle of it, a large grab handle right there, and all soft touch and stitch materials on the entire door panel. As you'd expect out of a luxury car, there are of course a wide variety of different interior finishes available. Moving over to the dashboard, you can see we have a very unusual style going on right here. We have one large air vent over here for the passenger, then we have this plastic section that has sort of a texture behind the plastic, and then we have some additional air vents right over here just in front of the glove box. But this stitched material section is not part of the glove box. You'll actually find the glove box below this area, although this is the release button right here. In the center of the dashboard, we find a large infotainment screen. This is running one of Lexus's latest software versions. You interact with the system using a touch controller, which we'll see in a moment, and this gives you access to all of your multimedia, phone, and app integration. It's worth noting that there is no Apple CarPlay or Android Auto integration in any Lexus product at the moment. Below the infotainment screen, we find our start-stop button over here on the left, a single large air vent there in the middle, the controls for our dual-zone climate control system, and then a large grab handle for the passenger over here. You can see there's an opening right there. Below the climate controls, we have a single-slot optical display. There's also a single cup holder right there in front of controls for the radio and infotainment system. In this button bank, we find dedicated buttons for radio, media, track forward, backward, and tune. There's also a power and volume knob. The rest of the system is controlled via this Lexus Remote Touch controller. This is probably my least favorite infotainment system input method. This is an awful lot less intuitive and takes your eyes more off the road than the control knobs we find in the German products. It does feature a direct access button for the map, the menu, a back button, this large touch area right here, which does not offer finger writing recognition. To the left of that, we have a joystick-style shift knob that's unique in the Lexus family. We pull it over to the left and then down for drive, pull it just over to the left for neutral, over to the left and up for reverse, and if you want the manual mode, you simply pull it straight down. There's a little diagram right here to show you how to move that shifter. Park is activated by this button right here, and then we have auto brake hold via this button. Between the front seats, we have a softly padded center armrest. This opens in two ways. It first slides back, so we have access to another small cup holder right here. This is where the key is hiding right at the moment. And then there's a hidden lever inside that flips the compartment over to the side. And if we do that, we find a moderately sized storage cubby with USB and auxiliary inputs and a 12-volt power port. The LC uses a full LCD instrument cluster, but this is a little bit smaller than we see in some of the competition. The instrument cluster uses a physical dial right around the tachometer, very much like we see in the RC Coupe, to sort of dress up the LCD. With the dial in the center, on the left side we get engine temperature and fuel level, but if we move the dial over to the right side using the buttons on the steering wheel, you'll notice we get a different menu on the left. The left side of the display is where we find things like the status of the vehicle's active safety systems, status of the infotainment system, navigation turn-by-turn directions, vehicle information, vehicle settings, as well as our typical trip computer information. You'll notice that when the display is in this mode, they put the fuel gauge and the engine temperature gauge shrunken right down here on the left side. The display also changes depending on the drive mode that you're in. Right now we're in the normal mode. We also have a comfort mode and an eco mode. And as we see in other Lexus models, Sport and Sport Plus. The steering wheel is a round 3-spoke design with large paddle shifters on the back that move with the steering wheel. These are some of the best paddle shifters in the luxury market right now. They are metal rather than plastic like we see in a lot of luxury vehicles, and they remind me a great deal of the paddle shifters on something like the Nissan GT-R. On the left side of the wheel, we find the controls for that multifunction instrument cluster over there, a 4-way joystick with OK button, page change button that allows the ring to slide side to side, phone button, voice command button, volume up, down, and then on the right side of the steering wheel, we find the controls for the radar adaptive cruise control and the lane keeping assistance system. Heads-up displays are notoriously difficult to film, but we do have one here in the LC500, but this is not the new enormous heads-up display that we find in the Lexus LS. Because the LC500 uses a naturally aspirated 5-liter engine, acceleration times are behind the competition, which use primarily twin-turbo V8s. You'll go from 0 to 60 in about 4.7 seconds in the model that we're driving here. It will take about half a second longer if you get the hybrid version of the LC. That means that this is just about as fast as your average mid-size luxury vehicle in America at this time. For instance, something like a Genesis G80 with its 5-liter V8 will go from 0 to 60 just about as quick as this model. If you're looking for fast acceleration, this is not going to be the right model for you. Something like the Mercedes GT is definitely going to go 0 to 60 faster, as are a wide variety of Porsche 911 models. However, this is definitely more livable than a 911. They end up a little bit too hardcore for me. This is definitely more relaxed and more comfortable, especially if we start putting this in the comfort suspension mode. You might be wondering why Lexus used a naturally aspirated engine under this hood. The most likely reason for that is that they already had the engine, of course, because it was used in the Lexus RCF and the GSF, but also because Lexus tends to prefer naturally aspirated engines as they're more reliable in general terms than a turbocharged engine. So if you're looking at keeping your luxury two-door coupe around for a long time, this is going to be much more reliable and less expensive to own and operate than the German competition. Acceleration may not be up to the same level as the German competition, but the LC really does very well when it comes to handling. Lexus, in fact, does very well when it comes to handling dynamics in basically every vehicle that they make. Now, that's not to say that Lexus vehicles will generally outhandle the competition, but when comparably equipped with comparable tires on them, the Lexus models will generally hold their own in terms of handling ability, and in terms of overall handling feel, they actually excel versus something like a BMW 3 Series, 5 Series, or 7 Series. That's because a lot of the German car companies have been spending the time softening their vehicles, making them a little bit more comfortable and a little bit more compliant. Meanwhile, Lexus has been spending a lot of time focusing on driving dynamics. It's worth noting, of course, that none of the competition is going to sound quite like the LC 500. This transmission is a little bit slower shifting than I would like, even in the sport mode with the manual shifts, but the engine sounds absolutely incredible. It has very well-timed throttle blips for downshifting, and the engine sounds incredible because there's no turbocharger or supercharger in the way. The way that power builds in this engine is also very natural, and it's something that we don't find in the German competition because this isn't forced induction. So torque arrives a little bit later in the RPM band, it builds very naturally, it doesn't just arrive instantly like you find in a turbocharged engine or a supercharged engine, and of course there's no turbo lag because there's no turbo. And that means that in terms of overall precision, there are definitely some reasons that you would want to drive the LC 500 over something like a GT or even a Porsche 911, although this is again not going to be as fast. In truth, vehicles like this are going to spend most of their time in the more comfortable suspension modes, and that's where the LC 500 does really well. Even in the comfort mode, we don't have a great deal of body roll, although we do find more than when we're in the sport modes, but this makes a very, very comfortable weekend cruiser. As we've come to expect out of Lexus, the cabin is fairly quiet, and fuel economy is fairly good for a naturally aspirated 5-liter V8 engine. Of course, you can also get this same vehicle in the hybrid drivetrain, and you can get around 30 miles per gallon if you treat that vehicle very gently. Bottom line out on the road with the LC is that Lexus has definitely gotten the handling and the steering exactly where it needs to be for this kind of vehicle, but it just lacks the insane fun factor that we find in some of the competition with their massive horsepower figures from their twin-turbo engines. So it really depends on what you're looking for. This definitely has the sort of precision that we've come to expect from Lexus, but it doesn't have the same kind of acceleration as the Germans. For 2018, the LC starts at about $92,000. For that price, you actually get a great deal of standard equipment. I know it sounds odd, but when you're taking a look at large luxury vehicles or luxury coupes like this that are on the expensive end of the spectrum, it's pretty common to not have a number of standard features that you would expect a car like this to have. For instance, radar adaptive cruise control, LED headlamps. It's not uncommon for the competition to not include those. Lexus, on the other hand, puts a great deal of standard equipment on even the base LC 500. We get the glass roof, we get their latest safety systems, including pre-collision warning, autonomous braking, radar adaptive cruise control, pedestrian detection, etc. We also get those standard LED headlamps, keyless go, and all those kinds of goodies. However, we don't find the same level of optional goodies in this cabin that we do find in the competition. You won't find any large LCD instrument clusters in this vehicle. You also won't find the 28-way massaging seats that we find in the Lexus LS luxury sedan. As we have been driving this vehicle, this came in at $101,000. That's obviously a lot of money, but it's not uncommon for luxury vehicles like the LC 500 or its competition to have tens of thousands of dollars of additional options on them, and the LC 500, even as we have equipped here, is a fairly good deal. And that's really the key thing about the LC 500. If you're after the value proposition or the reliability that's inherent in most every Lexus model, then this is going to be a very good deal for you. If, however, you're after the absolute in acceleration, the absolute best in handling, the absolute best in luxury or gadgets, then the LC 500 is not going to be the right car for you. When it comes to the visual wow factor, the LC500 unquestionably has everything going on. I actually really like this look. I haven't been the biggest fan of the Lexus spindle grille in some of Lexus's other models, but I think it really works with this car. And I think that's because the entire car is very, very stylized, from the front to the back to the sides with these large functional vents everywhere. The grille just makes sense in this car, and it doesn't make quite as much sense in some of their SUVs for me. But again, things really come down to performance for me, and that is where the LC500 lags behind the competition. So if I were shopping in this particular segment, I'm not entirely sure I would buy the LC500. Again, unless you're really looking for something that's very reliable or has that excellent value proposition. Be sure and check out our other related videos down there, including the Mercedes-Benz GTC, which Lexus actually thinks competes directly with this vehicle. I'd probably take the Mercedes.